They robbed her of victory. That was the angry exclamation heard on pool decks, in living rooms, and across social media when Lia Thomas, a transgender woman swimmer, tied with standout competitor Riley Gaines in a pivotal sports championship. The controversy exploded overnight, pitting those who demanded a strict adherence to historic gender classifications against advocates for inclusion and transgender rights. Suddenly, the University of Pennsylvania was in the spotlight, forced to explain its role in allowing Thomas to compete in women's swimming. Where did it all begin? And how did the name Lia Thomas become both a champion and a symbol of national debate? In today's deep dive, we are uncovering the complex world of Title IX regulations, official executive orders, and the swirling moral and social controversies they generate. Our story revolves around the University of Pennsylvania's decision to support a transgender athlete, the subsequent pushback from the Department of Education under President Donald Trump's administration, and the rippling effects across the entire sports community. You might be wondering, how do these events tie into a broader clash of ideologies? And what exactly compelled the administration to step in and demand corrective measures from one of America's most renowned universities? In this episode, we will explore how Lia Thomas came to dominate the women's swimming scene, examine the claims made by critics like Riley Gaines and Paula Scanlon, and unravel why the Trump administration insisted on biology-based definitions for male and female athletes. We will also delve into the emotional aftermath for female swimmers and unearth the current stance of those who believe that trans individuals deserve full inclusion in sports. We promise a captivating look at the real motivations behind the University of Pennsylvania's compliance and the dramatic series of events that led to this point. It all began quietly enough, with Lia Thomas simply joining the women's swimming team at the University of Pennsylvania after previously competing on the men's team. Initially, her participation received little attention outside the immediate swimming community. Yet, as she started racking up impressive wins, questions about her physiological advantages came to the forefront. Did her background as a male athlete confer an edge in strength and endurance? Or should performance be measured purely on skill, discipline, and compliance with eligibility rules? People from all sides of the ideological spectrum began chiming in with fierce opinions. Conversations grew more heated when Thomas tied with competitor Riley Gaines in a championship race. The image of two swimmers touching the wall in perfect unison was overshadowed by the swirling narrative of who truly deserved a trophy reserved for female athletes. Gaines, a powerful voice and reluctant focal point in the controversy, publicly supported Thomas at first, but as her own misgivings took root, she later emerged as a vocal critic, asserting that fairness had been compromised. To many, Gaines's about-face carried immense weight, especially when she spoke of losing opportunities to someone she believed benefited from a distinct physical advantage. Then came the Trump administration's executive order, frighteningly titled, "Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports." Issued in February of the same year that Lia Thomas clinched her national title, this decree signaled a dramatic shift in how the federal government would interpret and enforce Title IX protections. Historically, Title IX was introduced in the early 1970s as a groundbreaking measure to ensure gender equity in educational settings, including athletics. Now, the question was, should transgender women be recognized as women for the purposes of competition? Or did scientists, policymakers, and lawyers owe it to cisgender female athletes to carve out narrower eligibility criteria? Up until that point, the University of Pennsylvania insisted on abiding by the NCAA rules, which allowed Thomas to compete if she met certain hormone requirements. Critics felt that the bar was far too low, while supporters championed this approach as a symbol of a more inclusive society. Then the Department of Education stepped in, effectively proclaiming that Pennsylvania's venerated institution had violated the essence of Title IX by letting Thomas enter women's swimming events. The argument? Title IX was designed to ensure fairness for female athletes, and allowing a transgender woman to compete was classified as an infraction. With tensions already sky-high, the dramatic next step arrived. The University of Pennsylvania agreed to settle the matter by meeting the administration's demands. They offered a formal apology to swimmers who felt undermined by Thomas's presence, revived the official listing of titles and records for the female athletes who competed during that season, and pledged to publish a statement declaring a new adherence to biology-based definitions. For some, this was cause for jubilation, a sign that the Trump administration was steadfastly defending women's sports. For others, it was a wrenching regression, invalidating trans identities and using official governmental force to isolate a largely misunderstood community. This begs the question, what about Lia Thomas herself? Despite being fully compliant with the regulations in effect at the time, she faced an onslaught of personal attacks and a suffocating tide of publicity that sought to paint her as a villain. She found herself at the intersection of a ferocious cultural debate. Although the NCAA rules at the time recognized her eligibility, the administration's new stance effectively overrode that acceptance. It left many observers wondering if the future would hold even more restrictive policies, making it far harder for transgender athletes to compete in women's events. Before we march on, let's reflect on the broader implications. Issues of identity, biology, and social acceptance are deeply emotive. For centuries, the dividing line between male and female has seemed self-evident in sports. However, modern science paints a more complex picture, standing at odds with certain cherished notions. Meanwhile, some argue that empathy for trans individuals and acknowledgement of their journey should lead us to expand the boundaries of athletic inclusion. Whose perspective holds ultimate sway, and can there be a middle ground that respects female athletes' right to fairness while also welcoming trans competitors? We will probe these questions further. If you are already captivated by the magnitude of this story, consider expressing your support by gently tapping that thumbs up button to let us know we are on the right track. This topic continues to stir passions across the country, and your feedback helps us bring more clarity, nuance, and depth to discussions that matter. Let us pivot to the vantage points of some of the most vocal dissenters. Riley Gaines, who experienced the tie with Thomas firsthand, described it as both surreal and disheartening. Initially, Gaines had extended goodwill, believing that sports should embrace every athlete who satisfies the applicable regulations. But her confusion grew when she and Thomas ended up standing on deck, uncertain how to handle the awarding of the trophy. Her disenchantment deepened after reflecting on the physical disparities. Gaines lamented that she had spent her entire career pushing herself, only to find that the competition might not be a level playing field. Then there was Paula Scanlon, Thomas's former teammate at the University of Pennsylvania, who also felt compelled to speak out. Scanlon's concerns were multifaceted. She highlighted the discomfort of sharing a locker room with someone she viewed as male-bodied. That sense of awkwardness was magnified by the strong, persistent sense that the administration cared more about embracing progressive ideals than it did about protecting the experiences of female swimmers. Scanlon also questioned whether Thomas's presence overshadowed the accomplishments of female athletes who had worked diligently, sometimes for years, to claim their moment in the limelight. On the other side are individuals and advocacy groups championing transgender participation, who argue that excluding trans women from meaningful competition effectively denies them equal status in society. They challenge the assumption that a transgender athlete inevitably enters an event as a gold medal favorite. They cite scientific studies suggesting that hormone therapy significantly reduces physiological advantages. For them, Lia Thomas is a courageous athlete bravely forging a path for others who might hesitate to enter a fiercely gender-segregated field. Polls on this matter show a broad national divide, with no clear consensus on how policy should reflect the complexities of sex and gender identity. Nonetheless, the Trump administration forged ahead with a crystal-clear stance: keep sports strictly segregated based on biological sex assigned at birth. Their argument hinged on the claim that ignoring these distinctions would systematically disadvantage women. To underscore their position, they invoked Title IX's original intent as a measure designed to expand opportunities for female athletes. In their view, that meant ensuring transgender women were recognized, in legal contexts, as men. The rhetorical clarity of keeping men out of women's sports left little room for ambiguity, while simultaneously igniting an inferno of debate among civil rights groups, scientists, and parents around the nation. Yet the administration did not stop with a simple policy statement. They demanded tangible remedies from the University of Pennsylvania. Because Lia Thomas had competed under previous rules, her accomplishments were threatened with an asterisk in sports history. The Department of Education took the position that the presence of a transgender athlete on a women's team, without explicit disclaimers, had effectively violated the guidelines that they believed were mandated by Title IX. They declared that colleges and universities receiving federal funds must abide by biology-based definitions of male and female, or else risk losing significant financial support for their programs. In the end, the University of Pennsylvania yielded. Facing the prospect of intense legal action, potential loss of federal funding, and ongoing public scrutiny, they ratified an agreement to rectify what the Department of Education viewed as a past harm. That agreement required Penn to apologize to the female swimmers for forcing them to compete against, and in some cases lose to, a transgender colleague. It also mandated the reissuance of any awards or titles that female athletes might otherwise have claimed if Thomas's times had been ineligible. The campus erupted in fervent discussions about the moral integrity of caving to external political pressure. Many empathize with the feel of heartbreak this might bring to transgender students on campus, who see the resolution as an institutional message that their identities are conditional or subject to challenge. Meanwhile, conservative voices hailed the decision as a triumphant moment, citing the restoration of fairness to women's competition as the ultimate victory. Riley Gaines, in her statements, emphasized the significance of having an administration that actually fights for women's rights instead of merely paying lip service. She argued that allowing a biologically male athlete to dominate a female sports category was in direct conflict with the spirit of Title IX. Then there is Paige, a hypothetical high school swimmer watching this saga unfold, uncertain about her own future in the sport. Seeing the intensity of the conflict, she contemplates whether the doors to collegiate athletics will one day hinge on her competing against transgender athletes. Should she accept the possibility as an inevitable part of our evolving society, or should she demand the strict segregation that some claim ensures a level playing field? Paige's uncertainty reflects the broader tension among many families who worry about whether an entire generation of female athletes will be overshadowed by the potential rise of transgender participation. Nevertheless, some experts argue that fears of a transgender takeover in women's sports are overblown. They highlight that the number of trans athletes remains small, that hormone therapies do reduce muscle mass and other perceived advantages, and that attitudes about rigid gender binaries need modernization to reflect contemporary social realities. Their hope is that this historic moment serves as a catalyst for more nuanced discussions about how to integrate fairness, safety, and inclusion. Where exactly the lines should be drawn is still a matter of scientific inquiry, cultural debate, and constant legal reinterpretation in a society that is evolving faster than ever. If you find this conversation illuminating, please consider subscribing to stay connected with future explorations of athletics, policy, and the rapidly changing intersection of gender identity and social norms. We strive to dissect the stories that shape our collective consciousness, and your subscription ensures you will not miss a moment of the ongoing debate. Riley Gaines stands as a key figure in the backlash, her initial open-mindedness evolving into a sense of betrayal and, ultimately, advocacy. She admitted that early on, she felt a camaraderie with Thomas, highlighting how the entire sports community shares similar challenges: grueling training schedules, early morning swims, and the universal quest for self-improvement. But these warm sentiments seemed overshadowed once she realized that the typical markers of men's physiology, even if dampened by hormone therapy, might remain. With her prior acceptance shaken, Gaines stepped confidently onto a national stage, championing a definition of fairness that excludes trans women. As she told journalists, "I had no choice but to speak up for the women who couldn't find their voice in this debate." In contrast, many trans activists see Gaines's position as rooted in fear and misconceptions, possibly fueled by sensational narratives. They urge critics to understand that an athlete's journey involves much more than a single aspect of biology, and that being transgender is not a trivial choice or an attempt to game the system. Even so, the administration's firm response shows that while certain legislative bodies are willing to explore emerging definitions of gender inclusion, the White House under Donald Trump took a drastically different route, framing trans athletes as interlopers in categories meant for biologically female competitors. Meanwhile, back on campus, Paula Scanlon's personal perspective exemplifies the struggle of a teammate grappling with loyalties, personal discomfort, and a fundamental disagreement about what is right. She recounted her sense of violation at having to share intimate spaces with a transgender individual, a scenario that forced her to confront her own boundaries in ways she never expected. She also pointed to feeling a sense of disbelief that the university was so quick to champion equality for Lia Thomas, while seemingly disregarding the emotional well-being of women forced into uncomfortable situations. In many ways, her story mirrors the complexities inherent in bridging the gap between progressive inclusivity and preserving the historical sanctity of female-only sports. From the vantage of the administration itself, Secretary of Education Linda McMahon declared the outcome a testament to President Donald Trump's broader agenda to uphold traditional definitions of gender in legal contexts. McMahon insisted that the prior approach contravened Title IX's original intentions because, in her words, female athletes deserve a guarantee that their playing field will remain exclusive to biologically female participants. In the wake of the settlement, the Department of Education promised to keep a vigilant eye on institutions that might adopt more progressive policies in contradiction of newly codified federal guidelines. Yes, the swirling debate about Lia Thomas and the University of Pennsylvania might seem like just one isolated story, but the stakes reverberate across countless schools, teams, and sports federations. If one institution can be pressured into apology, restitution, and alignment with biology-based definitions, what does that say about the future of transgender inclusion in sports at all levels? Are we heading toward a new era where progress is rolled back in the name of fairness? Or is this a righteous stance ensuring that Title IX remains a beacon of opportunity for young women worldwide? Many observers note that while some trans advocates might see this as a devastating loss, it could also serve as an opportunity for deeper reflection. Perhaps, they argue, new alternatives or divisions in sports might emerge, like open categories for transgender athletes or more granular classifications. The question, however, is whether we risk further marginalizing an already vulnerable community. To find workable solutions, policymakers, activists, and sporting organizations need to thoughtfully weigh the shared desire for fairness, cultural definitions of gender, and the right of individuals to live openly according to their authentic identities. Ultimately, Lia Thomas herself symbolizes a complicated moment in American sporting history, one in which individuality, identity, and the pursuit of athletic excellence clash with the potent legacy of Title IX and a presidential administration determined to hold on to a more rigid understanding of gender. Whether she stands as a heroic trailblazer who dared to shatter old conventions, or a beneficiary of policies that others deem misguided, the story of her rise and the subsequent response from the University of Pennsylvania and the White House provides an undeniable lesson. The lines we draw in society can shift with great speed, leaving individuals to navigate an often emotionally charged landscape. The resolution to the University of Pennsylvania saga might not be a neat conclusion at all. For one side, it reaffirms the belief that the hard-earned rights of female athletes have been defended and rightful winners recognized. For another, it reopens old wounds about trans acceptance, broadcasting a message that identity can be overruled by external rulebooks. Conversely, for thoughtful onlookers, it prompts a deeper realization that the intersection of sports, law, and cultural transformation is far more layered than a simple question of who gets to compete. For now, you know how the University of Pennsylvania chose to end this chapter, apologizing, delivering restitution, and vowing to abide by an executive order that redefines the scope of women's sports. But the conversation is far from over. Will legislators in different states follow suit, or will other administrations adopt more inclusive interpretations? Will the experiences of Lia Thomas and her teammates become a cautionary tale or a rallying cry for progress? The future is uncertain because the shifting currents of public opinion, scientific insight, and legislative power never remain static for long. One thing is sure, the debate over transgender participation in athletics has seized the national spotlight, and it is unlikely to relent anytime soon. This has been a deep exploration of a polarizing drama that continues to stir hearts and minds. Whether you side with those who champion biology-based definitions or believe strongly in the rights of transgender athletes, there is no denying the profound importance of these discussions. Bold stances, shifting alliances, and the unyielding power of personal conviction have converged on this explosive conflict. Each new revelation invites us to reflect on our own values, biases, and hopes for the future of competition. Ultimately, sports serve as a mirror for society at large, and how we handle these controversies may offer a glimpse into our ability to reconcile tradition with progress.